Now joining me in studio, he's a top producing realtor. He's a great friend of the show. We go out in the field with him to see what he has going in his market, and then we bring him in studio. Mike Cameron joins us in studio. Good to have you here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me in.
Yeah, and we got a special guest who I just met in between the break, Derek Runyon. You're a general contractor. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the investor market, all the stuff you do. I think it's a very, very important topic. So good to have you here as the authoritative expert in the space. Yeah. Before we get into that, Mike, how are we doing? How's the market?
Great. Very, very quick market this year. It got off to a very fast start. Very low inventory, of course, as we're always hearing. And today we're getting a lot of investors coming out of the woodwork. And it's really, everybody wants to be an investor, right? They hear the great returns that their neighbors or friends are making and they want to invest.
But isn't it more challenging now? Because if you have low inventory, the market's done its run up. I mean, how much higher can it go? It seems like it'd be a lot more challenging to make money as an investor.
It is, but I think investors today are exploiting the lack of inventory in the lower third end of the market, which is the first time buyer market. That's the 250,000 to 550 market.
Do you think that you can get a pulse of the market by what the investors are doing? Because to become an investor, you have to be pretty intelligent. You have to have money. Those things can go hand in hand at times, not always. I know some dumb people that have a lot of money. But when you're looking at people that are buying properties, in this case cash, that's got to be a sign for the market.
You've hit on something that's really kind of an interesting dynamic that I've been seeing over the past 10 years. Back in 2005, 6, and 7, as the market was accelerating, you could see investment capital come in here when the value was really glaring.
Right.
As prices peaked, those investors took off, moved to Nevada, moved to Arizona, other markets that had more value. It's really interesting what's happening today. Probably once every 1 or 2 days, I get an email or a phone call from an investor who says, Mike, I've got cash, I want to put it to work in the San Diego market. That to me tells me that they're back.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about things like flips versus renovation, Derek, I think those are two very different things. It seems to me like flippers have this stigma, like a negative thing. I mean, for example, I'll just share with you guys, I've told our audience plenty of times, I went through a renovation on my home. A lot of the neighbors were like, you're a flipper. No, I'm your neighbor. I live here. We're just doing some work. And it was weird to me. I was like, wouldn't you want this house and some of these other torn down homes to be fixed up? Why do you think there's that negative stigma?
That's a good question. I think it's you're not making yourself a part of our community. You're just here to get in and get out. You're going to make a bunch of noise. You're going to wreak havoc for 2 months.
Yep.
And then you're going to bounce. You're not going to take any responsibility for our concerns, our cares as neighbors. You have no interest in what we have interest in, and that's this neighborhood.
Makes sense.
Flood the streets. You're going to take up all the parking spots. Your guys are going to be rude. They're going to leave traffic everywhere. And it's just that kind of get in, get out mentality that people are expecting out of them, as opposed to that real customer service concierge that they get when somebody like me, who has a reputation to uphold in the community, comes in to do a renovation project.
Well, a big takeaway here is that when they're done, it's not like a new first-time home buyer doesn't move into the home.
That's right.
That family does move into the home. It's just a safer home. It brings your property values up.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big need for it, especially in San Diego, where a lot of these neighborhoods you have like a really nice home and then a rundown one, and some of them are hundreds of years old. But then there's the renovation space. Explain what people are doing now. So I think Mike started to touch on it, but what are you seeing as far as adding square footage, extra bedrooms, views, rooftop decks?
Right. It's really dependent on the neighborhood. The allowances of the city is huge, but it's dependent on what can you do. So people want to do the most they can do for the best profit, right?
Sure.
So if adding square footage is within their ability as an investor and they are fully able to do it, allowable by the city and setbacks and such, then they're going to do it because it's the biggest bang for their buck. But there's also the times when you can walk in and you just say, it's just not worth it. Let's just blow and go, throw some carpet in, paint the walls, and we're out of here. Maybe we don't make a lot, but we're in and out in a month. You know what I mean?
What are the biggest mistakes that get made in this process?
Well, there's a few. So first and foremost is whether it's an investor or a homeowner, I see this across the board, is a real lack of planning that comes back to a lack of understanding the super finite details of a project. I had a customer mention to me last week, we were going through his particular project in La Jolla, and he said, I never imagined I'd be making so many decisions on so many small details every single day. And so when you don't understand that going in, you're gonna set a budget that's unrealistic for what you imagine is, I'm gonna throw some cabinets in, I'm gonna do a couple of countertops, some new faucets, man, I'm gonna get out of this thing for 20 grand. And then you get into it and you go, oh.
Double it.
There's drywall, oh, there's this, oh, you have to move the pipes, and so that's where you get into real issues of
So
of
time
expenditure.
and money can really
It's always
go
that
down.
investment rule. It's always going to take twice as long as you think and be twice as expensive as you think.
Just
Yeah.
plan on
Underestimating.
it. Just plan on it.
So,
Yeah.
Mike, a lot of investors will have you take the home to market to bring it cleaned up in a nice shape
Yeah.
For that first-time home buyer, that move-up buyer. Are there areas that you identify as being good for this?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of activity going on, and Derek can mention a few too, but there's a lot of money going down in Imperial Beach. I just met with the guy in the Port District who
Imperial
said one of
Beach is
their
an interesting
biggest
area, yeah.
It's really interesting because we've been here for many, many years, and it's just so interesting how that beach community is taking so much time to develop. But the Port District was expressing to me that that's one of the most important areas for them in terms of priority and putting money into it. So I think investors are down there ahead of that development.
Doesn't that make a ton of sense, though? I mean, you can only invent so much dirt. You can only invent so much sand. It's the last remaining coastal line.
Yeah.
And we did an interview down there for the American Dream months ago. I don't think I've ever been down to IB. I was blown away at some of the advancements in the commercial space down there. I mean, stores and shops and all kinds of just really cool things to do down there. But then you go into the neighborhoods and
Yeah, it
little
still has some way
rundown.
to go.
Yeah.
There are other areas, Golden Hill we like, Barrio Logan, if you've been down there. It's
Yep.
just beautiful how that's really blooming right now. North County, Oceanside, another coastal area that is starting to get some development, so it's exciting.
Awesome. Well, Derek, appreciate you coming in here. GC, the first time we've had a GC on the show, general contractor. So if you have questions about investing or doing anything like that yourself, these are good guys to connect with. Mike Cameron, top producing realtor. Always good to have you on the show as well. Thank you,
a lot.
guys.
Thanks a lot.